After installation of the raising mattress and preparation of the bed, the nursing staff stands in flexed lateral lunge position and with the two gluteal and scapular spoons performs the raising by a simple inversion of the lunge position. With such procedure, raising becomes easy and comfortable. When the patient can help with the handling, the nurse respects the spontaneous movement of the body, giving him the handle by supination. The gliding mattress enables the raising procedure. It is easy to remove the gliding mattress by a simple hold in a pronation movement from its lower edge and to glide to the nurse. The size of the gliding sheet enables the handling of a dependent patient's whole body. The nurses, after installation of the gluteal and scapular spoons, make a seesaw movement by inversion of the lunge position. The gliding sheet, which is smaller, makes the raising of the top of the body easier when the patient is actively participating with his lower limbs. He lifts his head and pushes on his heels. Also, when the autonomy concerns the four limbs, the seesaw effect becomes fully effective. The handling of the nurse remains logical and entirely secure. The time and effort saved by using these technical aids help both the patient and the nurse. Thanks to the use of the transfer sheet, a transfer in the lying position eases the burden on the nursing staff's back, despite the weight of the patient's body. After adjustment of the bed and installation of the gliding sheet, the nurses, while facing each other, execute a lateral turning over movement towards the side, and the one facing the back of the patient introduces the gliding sheet deeply under the patient's body and spreads it out. Together they put the patient again on his back, then prepare their action by placing pushing holds by supination to hips and thorax. The transfer is performed by a support movement with the sheet to the close targeted side and a lifting off movement from the other side to leave. The sliding and pushing gesture of one nurse and the enveloping attitude of the other respect the spontaneous movement of the body. To take the gliding sheet off easily, the nurse puts her hand inside the sheet. Thanks to a counter hold on the patient's hip, she removes the sheet with a gliding action. She performs the same thing for the top of the body. To manage a translation movement for a semi-autonomous patient, the gliding sheet has to be prepared in advance and placed on the opposite side. The nurse superimposes the opposite lower limb and asks the patient to take his closer hip in order to make a lateral pulled rolling up movement. She then installs the gliding sheet along the patient's body, insisting fully under his body during the procedure. She puts the patient on his back again and now spreads out the sheet towards her. To facilitate this action, she takes the sheet by pronation at the scapular level and locks her holds by supination. She then makes an enveloping gesture immediately followed by a sliding pushing movement. The patient is thus transferred. To remove the sheet, the nurse takes the opposite side from the inside and pulls it to her in a Bowman position. To perform a writing procedure from a lying to a sitting position, it is important to anticipate the lower limbs, the raised bed backrest, and the postures and gestures of the nurse. The compass effect is fully facilitated by the gliding mattress positioned under the patient's buttocks. Thanks to the pivoting disc and to the nurse's assistance, the semi-autonomous patient can raise himself in full safety. The patient actively lifts his buttocks, the nurse positions the disc and installs a spoon lowered to the opposite knee and another one to the close scapula. She increases her spinal checking, asks the patient to take his shoulder, which she avoids, thus making the writing movement easier. The lumbar strap is then positioned and the quick razor installed near at hand to prepare the transfer. The main aim of a nurse is to maintain the autonomy of the patient. The technical aids have to follow the same purpose. After the active raising, the patient glides the disc under his buttocks, uses the backrest of the bed, and thanks to both aids, can easily sit down alone on the edge of the bed, respecting his spontaneous moving. His pivoting movement on his buttocks becomes then easier and his independence is fully respected. The transfer from a bed to an armchair is a frequent task for the nursing staff. To make this easier, the nurse raises the bed slightly higher than the armchair and installs the transfer board. Thanks to the direction of the patient's gaze, she performs a lateral swerving to insert the board under the buttock, then on the armchair. She asks the patient to lean on his fists, taking an anticipated bench position, and makes the transfer easier by glance orientation and pivoting action. The transfer becomes easy and fully secure for both patient and nurse. After an iso-leveling positioning of the bed and the armchair, the patient can easily manage his transfer on his own. Since the trajectory of the movement is a curve, the board respects this curve by its shape. The transfer board secures a reliable support in a continuous position, enabling transfer of the patient in total security. Covered with a gliding sheet, the board allows an optimal transfer, saving efforts for the patient. The nurse presents holds to the patient. They have to respect the trajectory of the spontaneous moving. The abdominal belt enables the patient to lean on the loops, making the necessary anticipation to the transfer easier. The gliding mattress initiates the transfer, whereas the rotation disc ensures its continuity. The leaning of the hands on the loops is essential to the neuromotor aspect of the transfer, while the rotation disc is the main element that secures it. The rotation disc has to be positioned under the feet of the patient, the foot being anticipated for the movement on the armchair side. The nurse places her foot between the feet of the patient, while her heel stays on the external edge of the disc, and the other foot is in anticipated position. With a counterbalance gesture, the nurse facilitates the buttocks lifting movement, then starts the rotation of the disc by a movement from the heel to the toe. Indeed, it is the action of the heel that makes the disc's rotation effective. To transfer oneself from the bed to the armchair means making a quarter turn. For a semi-autonomous patient, this quarter turn is facilitated thanks to the gliding mattress under the buttocks and the rotating disc under the feet. Spontaneous movement is thus favoured and respected. After the holding of the trousers by supination in the folds of the groin, the nurse invites the patient to take the loops of the belt and transfers the patient to the commode thanks to the pivoting movement facilitated by the rotation disc. It is the action of the heel that makes the disc's rotation effective. The padded transfer mattress glides on itself crosswise on the lying surface, saving efforts for this movement. The use of transgliss makes the action of the nurse easier. Thanks to the two pushers, she initiates a lifting off movement on the closed side to push horizontally to the opposite nurse. The return is made by a simple enveloping attitude. During a transfer from bed to stretcher with isoleveling, transgliss is placed at the junction of the bed and the stretcher. The nurses face each other in a bench position. They make the transfer easier by a sliding, pushing gesture for one and an enveloping attitude for the other. To transfer a dependent patient from the bed to the shower trolley, nurses use transgliss. After the isoleveling of the bed and the trolley, the patient is positioned on his side, and the transgliss is slid very close to the body. The nurse puts the patient on his back, the head of the patient leans on the head support, and his hemibody is also just in full contact with the transgliss. The nurses neutralise the arms and place spoons to pelvis scapula to transfer, with a predominance for a lifting off position from the opposite side to leave, and a support position to the side to reach. Thanks to the close combination of ergometricity and technical help, this kind of transfer saves a lot of effort. To remove transgliss, a nurse makes a lateral turning over movement, while the other nurse removes the technical aid. The walls of the shower trolley can be set in place again, and the variable height of the trolley will help the nursing care. To get out for a walk, visit the family, or go to a medical examination, the handicapped patient may need to travel by car. The transfer is more difficult and requires ergometricity knowledge and adapted technical help. The nurse positions the wheelchair next to the seat, prepares the rotation disc, on which she places one foot, the other being anticipated. She asks for the help of the patient, who leans on the armrest of the opposite wheelchair arm, and makes a transfer operation by a pivoting movement. The rotation disc makes the transfer easier. Equipped with the transfer board, the patient in a wheelchair will be able to move by himself to his car. He positions the wheelchair parallel to the seat, prepares the transfer board, puts the brakes on, removes the close armrest to glide a part of the board under the buttocks, and with a double leaning position, on both the board and the opposite armrest, is able to make the transfer by himself. His pivoting cushion is ready and will help him for the return transfer. He has just to release the brakes to move the armchair away, and then is able to move off completely free.